Fantastic. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for the folks I can see on the screen here. And we appreciate everybody kind of bearing with us at SEDCOCR. We normally have this sitting around a bunch of tables, enjoying lunch together and networking. We're a lot of people. We are trying to adapt to a new, hopefully relatively temporary normal. And one of the things that we wanted to be sure to do is reach out to our key manufacturing base and just kind of, we've been checking in pretty regularly the last few weeks, as we always do, but recognizing that a lot of the resources that have been put together to address business concerns have been kind of geared towards all businesses, and we wanted to be sure that we had a chance to at least talk with our manufacturers en masse and provide some resources to them, as we're hearing some different types of issues that they're dealing with. A lot of it's around supply chain, somewhat concerns about future, if orders are starting to dry up right now, what's that going to be like for future production, those sorts of things. So just so folks are aware, SEDCOCR has been part of a team of state and local agencies working together to try to coordinate resources for the business community. I hope that you've had a chance to at least take a look at our website. We not only do we have a new design for our website, but we've also we're pretty quick to add a coronavirus resource page, like a lot of folks did. But we try to keep ours really up to date with good information that was particular to the business community that we tend to serve. We also encourage you to follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn. That's where you get probably the most up-to-date information as we send resources out. But also, I think for us, we've been really clutching on to the good news stories that we're hearing, and Mid-Willamette Valley businesses have really been stepping up to serve emerging opportunities, particularly as it related to the coronavirus emergency. Just a couple examples we've been featuring. There's a gentleman named Kyle Kirsch in Silverton who has a business that makes products with 3D printer, and he was pretty quick to reach out to hospitals and figure out, okay, what kind of design specs do I need to meet to make a face shield? And he delivered 500 face shields to local hospitals, and then went out and bought 2 more 3D printers to increase his production to serve. We've also had some real good success stories with ADEC, switching, including retooling for some new product lines to address the shield and other PPE needs. And Watershed, a local clothing manufacturer that's got the cutting capacity to make a lot more gowns than it can handle even its own facility. So it's been reaching out to other businesses too to try to coordinate that. So that's where we really try to provide that kind of information and some examples. Our team has been working remotely and trying to coordinate as we see opportunities and issues. So SEDCOCR has been on the job, and we look forward to being able to resume these types of events in person. But for today, I do want to thank the group of people we have gathered here, as well as the folks that have called in to listen. We've got a good mix, I think, of resources to talk about what we have available. We're going to start with Carrie Baxendahl, who's the program manager for the Certification Office for Business Inclusivity and Diversity at Business Oregon. She's been there since 2013. Her office manages the certification of disadvantaged and emerging small businesses. Has also been tasked with working with emergency management on the coronavirus emergency. She'll be followed by our team from the Oregon Manufacturing Extension Partnership, Mike Vanier. I don't know if, Mike, do you go by Vanier or Vanier? I feel like I want to give you the French pronunciation. At any rate, Mike is Vice President of Client Engagement for OMAP. He has an extensive career in retail, consumer products, and manufacturing industries. He's consulted for many companies in the areas of managerial efficiency, operational optimization, and supply chain enhancements, among a lot of other topics. His partner at OMAP, Gary Connor, is a senior consultant, and he works here out of Salem as well. He's worked with over 200 companies and conducted over 800 continuous improvement events around North America. He's a two-time Shingo Prize winner and specializes in Toyota production system. And we're also happy to have Marty Goldman of he's our district director for the Small Business Administration for the Portland District. Marty and his team have been, as you can well imagine, in high demand, both for helping to explain what some of the resources are that are out there, as well as being the folks that are actually delivering on the initial rounds of financing that's available through the federal government to help businesses that are impacted, that you'll be hearing more about. So we're thankful for all three of these folks to be here, or four of these folks to be here. Marty's background is he's responsible for delivering all the SBA programs in the Portland region, and he works with our partners at the Small Business Development Center as well as the SCORE chapters around. And prior to the SBA, he was a banker with lending institutions like Wells Fargo and Toronto Dominion Bank. And he's served both as an active duty and as a reservist in the US Navy as an intelligence officer. So thank you for your service there also, Marty. We're gonna get started with Carrie Baxendall. And I would remind folks that we are gonna have an opportunity to answer questions. Please use the chat feature to submit questions, and we'll be, or the Q&A feature rather, on Zoom. And we hope to be able to address as many questions as we can in the time we have. So Carrie, thank you, and I'll let you start.
Thank you, Eric. Good afternoon, everybody. I apologize, I can't get video for some reason. Thank you for coming here today. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the state's efforts with our PPE project. Right now, the state, one of the first issues or that we commonly are talking about is what is the need for throughout Oregon. What we're operating under is that there's not too much that we can get. We don't have the ability quite yet to determine an accurate burn rate. So we're working with the governor's office under the assumption that whatever we can get, we need. Initially, we started out working with trying to get the top priorities, the N95 masks for medical personnel. And now we're switching or transitioning into the non-medical items such as the surgical masks, the gowns, the face shields, those sorts of things. We have an online survey that businesses can register under, and I will provide that so that it can be emailed out to everybody. Currently, we have about 950 businesses that have entered information into that website, and that includes anything from actual supply of N95 masks coming from China all the way down to coffee for those in need. It's pretty much any type of service and or product you can imagine that would be needed during this time. We're encouraging all suppliers to go to that website. Then we pull that information down from that, and we're working within Business Oregon with our teams, with our regional development officers, as well as our global team to work with those companies. We have about 51 manufacturers so far that are either actively producing PPE right now, the personal protective equipment, or have the ability to retool. So Business Oregon is working with those companies to get the resources that they need. So if you are a company that say used to make or generally makes leather products, but have the ability to sew and wonder if that's something that we need, the answer is yes, please. we would much rather get to a situation where we have a whole bunch of supplies, extra supplies that we can store for future situations than not have enough for what we need right now. We will also be sending out shortly a one-page sheet for firms that are interested in FDA requirements. The FDA has relaxed some of their rules. For example, there aren't requirements now for surgical masks, other than that they be properly labeled and use the proper material consistent with how the masks are going to be used. There are no restrictions as far as facilities right now. The FDA will not be doing inspections on facilities, but any testing that's generally done within a lab, the FDA is requesting that those documents be maintained with normal industry practices. The N95s still require approval from the FDA. And so I'll also include a link where businesses can go to get those, get that approval from the FDA. We are working with several distilleries in Oregon. I think that that's one of the good news pieces. Our distilleries really stepped up. Not only are we working with 4 primary distilleries, they've produced approximately 20,000 gallons of hand sanitizer currently. MODA and OLCC is working to spearhead that project. But even the smaller distilleries have provided the materials that they have for sale so that the state can purchase those and in turn give those to the larger distilleries to produce sanitizers. So I think it's really important to point out that Oregonians are really stepping up. They're working hard to do whatever they can to help facilitate a recovery in this area. And in addition, our Business Oregon, we do have a navigator, a small business navigator on our website. That's OregonForBiz.com. And that, like the other websites mentioned, definitely we work to keep that updated. So if you are in need of resources, and that's anywhere from questions about employees to financing options to what's the latest happening right now in the PPE project. So we're happy to answer any questions, and you can feel free to contact me directly or go through our website.
Thank you very much, Carrie. I know you've been, you and your team have been working, as a lot of folks, but very quickly to try to get some systems in place. And it's very impressive to see that 950 businesses have registered and the variety and depth of products that are coming through the system. And I use this as a reminder to, we are recording this presentation, so we will get a link out to folks that have signed up and other people that might want to listen. And you know, what we talk about will be linked on our webpage as well, as far as resources and other things that the speakers mentioned. If they're not already there, we'll highlight them. So thank you, Carrie. I appreciate you being part of this. Let's move on to the OMAP team. Mike and Gary, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what some resources are for our manufacturers.
Mike, you need to unmute.
Sorry about that. I apologize for getting started there. So thank you, Eric. Gary and I are colleagues here at OMAP. We are here to kind of talk about resources that are available to manufacturers within the state of Oregon. Through OMAP, you can see a list on your screen there. It's retooling to meet critical medical needs, supply chain longevity, social distancing on the shop floor, and then business continuity support. These are all areas that have been, many of them have been integrated into OMAP services for quite a while, but we are, but the need for these services has obviously, you know, significantly increased, and we have dedicated several members on our staff, you know, specifically to these needs. Next screen, Gary, or Gary, next slide.
Okay. That's really slow.
So as Gary's pulling that up, I can go ahead and start. There we go. So who is OMAP? You know, as I look at the attendee list, there's, you know, lots of familiar faces on there, but there are some that are not. So OMAP is a 501c not-for-profit management consulting firm. We are a blend between private and public funds, federal funds, state funds, and then client fees. We are measured really off of our client success. All of our clients get an opportunity to complete a survey after our work that speaks about the specific impacts, both operationally as well as financially within their organization. That's a survey that is commissioned by NIST, the National Institute of Standard and Technology. We have 23 staff statewide with over 500 years worth of combined manufacturing experience. The OMAP cannot be successful without our partnerships that we have, you know, around the state with, you know, organizations like SEDCOCR, SBDC, Business Oregon, all of the other, you know, economic development, you know, organizations, many out there that help us connect with the manufacturing community and then provide these resources. And they've been a tremendous resource in this, you know, uncertain, critical time. And it's the collaboration of that group that is really, I feel, providing a significant resource and impact to the manufacturing community. OMAP is part of the MEP National Network. So as part of the NIST Manufacturing Extension Partnership, there's an MEP center in every state. You can see the map there on the screen. That's a network that we can leverage if there is, you know, specific technical need or understanding. Our staff has the ability to reach out to that network to find out, you know, what the best practices or responses are being done, you know, nationwide. You'll see by the map of the state of Oregon there, we have staff and or offices, you know, really all the way down the I-5 corridor and then into Central Oregon. So, you know, we're a tremendous resource for the manufacturing industry. I'm going to turn this over to Gary, and then I will share at the very end of the OMAP presentation some of the services that we have available, you know, within this time. So Gary, take it from here.
Mike. So we are in unprecedented times. It's an unprecedented crisis in our lifetime, and lives are at stake, and we just have to get creative in our response to that. So we've made new friends and new partners, and we have to educate ourselves and our staff. We have to learn more than we ever wanted to learn about physical distancing and pandemics, but it's a joint effort with a lot of different inputs and outputs. So I myself have been working with people at the national level, federal level, state level, our economic development partners and advocacy groups, of course our manufacturers and the people that support them in terms of supplying raw materials. I've been doing a lot of raw material searches for folks that need masks, materials, shields material, and so forth. So we rely on the FDA and other folks, FEMA and so forth, to provide specifications and design alternatives for the personal protection equipment. And of course, our end goal is to make sure that the hospitals have what they need. So it's certainly a collaborative effort, and everybody's got to be involved in order to make this thing work. So I sure thank everybody that I've had a chance to work with. Kind of zeroing in on just in Oregon, for example, it's really a two-way communication that we're trying to leverage all the players in this. The hospitals are given the Department of the Governor's Office and the Department of wow, I went blank. Administrative Services, the information that they need, what kind of equipment that they need. That's getting translated through the business of Oregon down to OMAP, and then we collaborate with the manufacturers to see if we can find a source for that, companies that are willing to participate, and it goes back up to the hospital. So it's a closed loop system, so to speak. But a lot of research on our part to make sure that we're staying within the regulations. We're under what they call a emergency use authorization, which was alluded to a little bit earlier, where normally a manufacturer would have to get FDA certified to produce a surgical mask, for example, but using good manufacturing practices, since we're in this crisis, there's kind of a forgiveness of that while we're in this situation. So if you need any information about that, we have specifications about what you can and cannot do. We can provide that by way of an email attachment. So lots of research around funding too. People need to pivot to be able to produce these personal protective equipment, and sometimes they're doing that on their own dime right now out of a goodwill, but we know that they can't do that forever. So there's Manufacturing USA that we're coordinating with the workforce investment boards. I personally work a lot with Willamette Workforce Partnership, which is in the same building as SEDCOCR, and they're providing grant funds to help companies offset and prevent layoffs. So layoff aversion, training, getting people up to speed with repurposing equipment. And I've spent the last 3 days talking about some federal grant programs, including one through the Advanced Robotics for Manufacturing Institute. And so if you want information about that, we're happy to provide the details. I can't really talk about that in a 15-minute webinar, but it's pretty much anything that would qualify except for payroll. Determining manufacturers' capacities and capabilities is real important part of our research to make sure that they're able, they're trained, they have the equipment, they have the capacities to produce these critical medical protective equipment, and assist with any retooling. So we have engineering services that we can render in that, and of course connecting all those parties, which it really is a two-way street all the way up and down that supply chain. So in terms of supply chain, keeping in mind that there's horror stories out there about people price gouging and hoarding and so forth, and that can put pressure on what is normally a fairly easy way to get material. Medical staff needs PPEs regardless of the cost, but we have to be considering, you know, what is the unit cost of this thing going to be if we're buying material at a premium price. So considering the level of risk to your business, if those supply chains are disrupted or you can't, if you've pivoted to make these critical pieces of equipment and then you can't get material, it's a major, major problem. So we are helping manufacturers be proactive in developing new strategies and realizing we need to be flexible. We have heard horror stories about even federal organizations swooping in and outbidding everybody else and picking up all the material that was desperately needed. So we're trying to find new supply chains for our manufacturers, and we want to, if we can, even include those suppliers in our Zoom meetings and our operational excellence meetings to help them understand how important their relationship is to this process and to keep our capacities stable. We hope this is a short-term problem, and in the short-term frame of mind, we might have to get pretty creative and negotiate in some new ways and even discuss special terms based on the fact that funding may not be available for few weeks or a few months, and short-term federally guaranteed loans might take a while to get processed. But we want to make sure that we don't wait on the sidelines and let our medical staff go without the equipment that they need. So if OMAP can help in any of that, putting together grant proposals to help expedite the funding, we're happy to do that. Evaluating your inventory, your min-max levels that would ordinarily kind of be self-managed almost generally, and this is a special case. So we have people who are specialists in supply chain management, and glad to help in any way we can. Just changing gears for a moment here, talking a little bit about social distancing on the shop floor. OMAP really heard from our client base that this is a situation that they've never faced before. How are we going to keep people who are normally shoulder to shoulder, at a safe distance? So, first and foremost, create and educate and elevate the awareness of your teams to recognize symptoms. And if they do recognize within themselves or a coworker some symptomatic problems, how do they self-isolate, and what exactly constitutes self-isolation? So I might have to get flexible again with your absenteeism and attendance policies. Almost every company has policies, but we're in a special environment here that might need a little bit of flexibility. A lot of companies that we work with have seen the value of assigning a team or a leader to kind of be the point person to lead the change through this implementation and navigate this situation we find ourselves in. And that includes maybe even developing a social distancing policy for your facility. And I do have some examples that we can email to you if you'd like to see an example of one of those. But people are mobile and they move around, and how are we going to keep them from bumping into each other and maintaining physical distancing? So the objective is to help create a greater space among our team members. And I got a few examples here by photographs that might give you some ideas to spark your creativity. But a lot of our clients are learning that they might have to stagger their shift times, even splitting teams onto different shifts. They might only have a day shift, but they're saying, hey, it makes sense to split the shifts into 2 shifts to separate the people, and even stagger start times, break times, and lunches. Assigning people a special entrance and an exit to keep the congregation from happening, just limiting that physical distance. That's an example. Here's a photograph of an example of one company that had a door that they didn't want people going through. It couldn't be locked, so they actually made a physical barrier to prevent people from using that entrance and exit. Signage, of course, is remarkable in its effectiveness. Maybe one do not enter sign would be enough, but they actually put 2 on here to make it redundant and make it hard to ignore. Physically putting tape down, a barrier, it's a visual barrier, but it catches your eye and it helps people avoid contact and maintain the 6-foot rule. Allocating times throughout the day for cleaning services. I know at our house, we've always said if it's everybody's job to wash dishes, it's nobody's job. Somebody has to be assigned. So if it's Wednesday night, it's my turn to do the dishes, it'll probably happen. So having that assignment, a team or an individual dedicated to cleaning, and especially those areas that are high touch, doorknobs and handrails, that's going to minimize the chance for contamination and cross transfer of any viruses. So if you can, and it's not always possible, but ideally try to eliminate face-to-face meetings, use Zoom, use text messaging, use FaceTime. But here's an example of a team that had to have a face-to-face meeting, but they did it out in the parking lot, and you can see that they're maintaining a 6-foot distance from each other. And even the cars are parked farther apart than normal. Just another couple ideas. Avoid using each other's dishes, and that's just common sense, but utensils and dishes, and even not washing each other's dishes, sanitizing everything before and after use, taking the lid off of the trash can so you don't have to use the flapper, so you're not touching things, and having designated staff dispose of things, and even in that process using proper sanitation and gloves. So lots and lots of visuals is what you'll see in some of the clients that we work with. And in this case, they're using blue tape to an excess, but it keeps people from using certain portions of the table, and it keeps that physical distancing in place. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Mike to talk about business continuity support. And I do have a 1 o'clock meeting that I have to go into, so I'm going to listen as long as I can. But I appreciate your attention, and Mike, I'll let you have it.
Thanks, Gary. That was some, great information. And I saw a chat come up. We actually did I'm asking for some of this OMAP content, specifically on the social distancing within the manufacturing space. We actually did about hour-long webinar on it yesterday that was recorded, and it is on the OMAP website. But I can have our communications team email that out or get it to Eric or Michael, and then they can distribute that link to everybody on that everybody on this webinar, because there's other examples and more information. But that was a great way to cover that, Gary. OMAP has been around for 25 plus years. Most of our services have involved, or delivery areas have involved in 3 areas, which is your manufacturing operations. So, anything to do with, manufacturing, shop floor, facilities, engineering support. Then it's business and financial services, which is your, strategic planning, financial modeling, growth services, business transition. And then our third practice area being the, workforce solutions. That's anything to do with people. It's your recruiting, onboarding, training, leadership. But what we found is as this, pandemic, kicked off, that business continuity was a, major issue, and how are companies going to navigate that? So we took all of our service offerings, all of our practice areas, and we kind of reviewed those and put them into a business continuity, support initiative that really covers most of those. And you can see, based upon the, slide there, that it covers, really kind of 5 major areas. That's your sales impact. What's the current market what's the current market forecast impacts, and then what are the opportunities? Financial performance, current forecasted based upon what's going on, profit and loss balance sheets, and then cash flow statements and cash flow modeling. There's the leadership and communication plan. That's both internal as well as external. Okay, what are you telling your suppliers? What are you communicating to employees? And then what are you communicating to customers? There is your supply chain management, your current forecast impacts, inventory management, the amount of inventory that you're carrying on your balance sheet, those levels. Is there a way to convert some of that to cash? And then it's your operational planning and staffing, about your critical employees, your management, your knowledge capture of all those folks, upskilling employees, onboarding. We come out of this, anybody that had to shutter, employees. So with all that being said, we have put a team together that will work with these small to medium-sized manufacturers specifically on their continuity planning, both within this event and then how do they exit that. We understand this is a time that we don't want companies to let the financial concerns of how are they going to leverage these services or access these services to stop them from utilizing them. We are a mission-driven organization that we put our clients' needs first, and we want to work with you. So if OMAP can support you within this continuity support, or really with anything within your operations right now, please reach out to us. Let's not let the financial concern of what a project would cost stop you from, accessing these services. We will figure that out with you. We are also implemented a series of weekly webinars. All of those are currently on our website. We have John Hunt, one of our senior consultants, did one on leadership within certain times. Then we had, and then we've had another one on kind of employment law, employment changes within this time. We had one last week. Tom Schnell from Business Oregon came on to talk about cash flow modeling. Then the one I mentioned yesterday on the social distancing within the factory floor. It's all super valuable information. We really encourage you to listen to those webinars. On the OMAP website, there are all kinds of resources, relevant information that we're updating daily in regards to resources available for COVID-19. OMAP is here to support the manufacturing community, and we would love to talk with any manufacturers out there that we can support, and we can help them through this situation. Eric, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you very much, Mike, and thank you to Gary as well. Great information, and as a reminder, we will collect these various links and other information and get that out to all the participants. We've had a couple questions already about being sure that that information gets shared, so we will definitely do the follow-up on that. Finally, the last speaker we have is Martin Golden of the Small Business Administration. I know that SBA has probably been in the headlines, at least in the business community, more in the last few, 10 days, 2 weeks than they've probably been for a long, long time. So appreciate you taking the time to be with us today, Marty, and give us an overview of what the kind of main programs you're offering right now as far as resources for a business.
Sure. Thank you very much, Eric. You're right. I've gotten more attention paid to me in the last month than my prior 7 years at the SBA put together. But that's appropriate because we're in a really tough situation as an economy right now. We know that there's huge volumes of businesses that are in very dire straits. And then we've been trying to roll out these loan programs, which I'll tell you about shortly and very, very quickly. I would ask for everybody's help in being patient. I know that many of you have huge problems with cash flow, but we've been trying to roll out these programs. It's only been about 10 days since the law was signed into effect, and we've had to handle a volume of inquiries that is and applications that's utterly unprecedented within the SBA. So we've been working with private sector partners to try to increase the volume of our loan portals and get guidance out to banks. And so everybody's flying a little bit blind. I've heard it said a number of times, but it's like trying to fly a plane while you're building it at the same time. So I have seen improvement as we've run into problems. We have mass chaos, but within 3 or 4 days or a week, it seems to be running much, much smoother. And that's certainly been the case with one of our loan programs anyway. And so right now I'm going to talk to you about the various programs the SBA is working on as a result of this coronavirus COVID-19 disaster. So let me start with something easy. For any of you who have existing 7A loans with the SBA, or who take out new regular SBA loans as opposed to disaster loans, there's going to be a 6-month, not even a moratorium on paying principal and interest. The SBA will be paying all P&I for a 6-month period for anybody who has an existing 7A loan or who takes out a new one right now, again, outside of the disaster programs. And so the way that gets managed is the banks will contact the SBA about customers they have that are making P&I payments, and the SBA will make those payments for them. And so that's one thing that we're doing. We have a existing economic injury disaster loan program. So we have 2 major loan/forgiveness programs going right now. One is called the EIDL, which stands for Economic Injury Disaster Loan. The other is the Payroll Protection Program, which everybody is calling at this point PPP. So the EIDL loan is an old loan program that the SBA has had for a long, long time. If you've been in a normal disaster, a flood, blizzard, a hurricane, whatever it might be, and you have a business that's been impacted negatively because of that, in other words, they've lost business, in the past they could apply for one of these EIDLs. And so it's really the same program. It's got better terms now. It's been supercharged for the coronavirus problem, but it's basically the same program that has existed for a long time. The difference here is that we've gone from having a program that was not used a ton, just case by case, and now it's a major program that people are putting in applications for in huge volumes. And so we had some initial difficulties with our old online portal. It just couldn't handle the volume. We took it down. Some people were able to get through at great cost to, hours and hours trying to get it through the online portal. We took it down for about 4 or 5 days, and people were sending in paper forms. As of about not this last Sunday, but the Sunday before that, we put in a new online portal that was created in connection with a private partnership. It's very quick. There's very little information that's looked for, and the average person can get through it in 15 or 20 minutes, really. And from what I've heard from everybody, almost universally, in fact, I've not heard of any cases where it didn't work. People have been able to get through it, and with an additional twist, Congress, as part of the CARES Act, authorized money to provide up to a $10,000 advance on the EIDL loan that's forgivable. So toward the end of the application, you're asked to check a box. Would you like to be considered for the advanced EIDL? And if you say yes, the idea is that within a few days, they're going to deposit money into your account. Again, it's for up to $10,000, but that's based on employees. So if you have one employee, that would be $1,000, and 10 would be $10,000. That portion of, if you get that popped into your bank account, that's forgivable. If you apply for the EIDL, let's say you're asking for $50,000 and you got 10 up front as the advance, and you decided you didn't want to do the deal for $50,000, or you were rejected for whatever reason, you do not have to repay that advance payment, whether it was $1,000, $3,000, or $10,000. Okay, so the bad news is that everybody who did EIDL applications prior to this new portal, which has been in existence since about Sunday before last, would have to redo the application. And I've been told that everybody who put in applications before that was informed by email that they had to reapply. I think most people reapplied anyway because you couldn't get the up to $10,000 unless you reapplied. But if you've got an EIDL application that you did a few weeks ago and you're not already in discussions with a loan officer, because some of the old ones did get approved and they are working with people. But if you haven't been contacted based on an old EIDL application and you didn't redo it in the last week or so, you need to redo it. So the terms on that is up to $2 million. It's a loan at 3.75%. Any P&I payments are deferred for the first 12 months, although it does continue to accrue interest. It does not require a personal guarantee, unlike all the other SBA loans, unless the loan is for over $200,000. The term out on the deal is going to be either 15 or 30 years. Those are the two choices that are apparently offered to people. And so you can use these EIDL loans to make payroll, to pay interest on debt. You cannot use it to repay long-term debt, but you can use it to service debt. Accounts payable, inventory, whatever the needs of your business are, and it's generally sized at about 6 months of runway on your cash flow. Okay, so now let's turn to the PPP. This is the program that was put into place with the CARES Act that was passed Friday before last. You probably read about $349 billion of loans going to small businesses through the PPP or through the CARES Act. That's what this is. This program is for up to $10 million. Any amounts which are not forgiven will bear interest at 1%. That's going to be deferred for 6 months. No collateral, no guarantee, and it's a 2-year term. So we provide 100% guarantee for the banks on it, so that incentivizes them to do those loans. And the good news about this is it's forgivable to some extent. So the purpose of the payroll protection program, and this be more relevant for manufacturers who have large payrolls, is it's supposed to get people working, or it's supposed to get people paid. Let me put it another way. So this program was designed to have you keep your people on payroll or rehire the ones that you laid off already. And so up to 8 weeks of payroll, actual payroll, can be forgiven, plus about 25% that you may use the loan for other purposes, like making rent payments or lease payments or interest on debt. There's actually just a few things you can use this for. It's mainly for payroll. So the size of these loans are usually 8 weeks of payroll plus 25%. So, and then all that can be forgiven if you use the money for the right things. If you use money more than a certain amount for other things besides payroll, that may not be forgiven. And I did forget to make a distinction on the idle loans, which I was talking through first. They are going to take collateral if you have more than a $25,000 loan. So you will have to have collateral there. Although if you don't have collateral, it won't be a reason to turn the loan down. So they'll just take what they can get, but it's not going to be a determinant in whether you get approved or not. So those are the two major programs right now. Again, the EIDL is applied for on the SBA website and an online portal, and the PPP is applied for through local banks. And so with that, why don't I stop and see if there's any questions?
That's great. Thank you, Marty. Glad to hear the improvements on the EIDL. We had at least regionally, a coordinated effort to kind of amass some of the questions early on for the disaster loans and a common email address that came to a SEDCOCR box. And, maybe we get one a day now, and they're kind of general questions. We haven't had any major issues in a while. So that's sounds like it's working. It's a good sign. We did have one question. This was for Carrie that came in early on. Are there specific state needs or specific needs that are not being currently met? Some products or services that are in particular need that we can be going out to target manufacturers to address those needs?
Generally, the easy answer is we need everything. Right now, our top priorities are the N95 and the KN95 masks for our medical personnel and our first responders. Sanitizer, probably one of the best things that individuals could do. I think it was brought up earlier. Trying to locate materials. We're having a hard time locating the PETG plastic that's used in face shields. We're having a difficult time locating the materials used for making sanitizer, in particular the hydrogen peroxide and the glycerin and the alcohol. Materials used for making masks. I think that the non-medical masks aren't such a need given the fact that they can be made with cotton, but the masks that are made with more of a filtration system, those materials are hard to come by. But as I said earlier, it's primarily just about anything that you would expect in an emergency redundancy to be able to provide for the personal protective equipment.
Great, thank you. Marty, we got a question, I think, specific to SBA 7A loan. We have a local business that had been denied by their bank for a paycheck protection program loan because he was told he had an existing 7A loan already. Does having a 7A disqualify you for a PPP or other assistance?
No, I don't think it does. As long as the SBA 7A loan is in good standing, they should be able to get a PPP. There's a lot of misinformation right now with banks, and it's not all their fault. There's a lot of guidance that is just kind of confusing, and they're not sure. So, but I'm pretty sure that that's not going to disqualify you.
And do you know if the you know, we had some conversations with our Council of Governments, who I think some of the, I don't want to say non-traditional lenders, but the CDFIs and other organizations that have the ability to, you know, package loans, they're also being sources for the PPP as well, I understand.
Well, they can apply to become PPP lenders. Yeah, it's a more difficult process because we have sort of three categories. We have federally insured banks and credit unions who are already 750 holders, or people who already have agreements with the SBA. That's been a relatively smooth process. Then we have federally insured banks and credit unions who haven't, and there's a pretty quick process for getting approval to do that. And we've already gotten 7 new lenders in Oregon in the last couple days. There isn't a process by which people like CDFIs can become lenders, but it's more difficult. It takes more time, and frankly, I don't know whether they're being processed yet. The people who are certifying banks in Washington are just slammed like everybody else. So, yeah, they can, I think, become lenders, and if they're already a community advantage lender, which I think at least one of them is, they should be good to go. But the new ones, it's going to be a longer process.
Okay, great. Thank you. This is for the OMAP folks. I don't know if Gary's still on the phone, but Mike, you know, there's a couple surveys that have been going out that are, you know, reaching out to various Oregon businesses to try to identify short and long-term impacts. And, you know, as we kind of collected information in the Valley, looking at the manufacturers, you know, we saw generally maybe longer term concerns than the short term concerns, you know, beyond whether or not they were essential, and you know, some of the distancing requirements and OSHA requirements that have come up. I was just wondering, is there any discussion as to kind of a longer term you know, impact, and how OMAP might have resources, say, come end of the summer when there may be actual spike in manufacturers saying, oh, now this is caught up to us?
Well, that kind of, I guess the short answer to that is there's lots of conversation around that. We were on a Zoom call yesterday with several economic development folks and manufacturers, primarily located in the Portland metro area, but we're actually going to be opening that up next week, kind of a general manufacturing networking event for folks to kind of share about what they're seeing and when they feel that their impact is actually going to hit them. And so we're working towards identifying the appropriate services and you know, resources available for that. But I think it all goes back to this continuity planning, is looking at what is currently happening and then forecasting based upon what your industry is doing and what your models are doing in how to prepare for that. And the surveys that we're getting from both, you know, folks, you know, organizations like SEDCOCR, you know, Business Oregon, and then some of the other ones out there are helping us plan our, you know, our resource capabilities, you know, for the future. I think the impact that is going on out there is being felt differently by different companies and different industries. So the resources needed from a timing perspective are going to be different. I don't know if that helped, Eric.
I think it's something I know we just need to be aware of and cognizant of, is that as things hopefully come back to normal, there's definitely going to be reverberations that we need to be prepared for as far as resources and outreach and
Well, but Eric, I think the one thing I would add is don't wait for that. I mean, let's start talking now.
Yeah.
And let's be proactive instead of reactive, and trying to figure out when that impact is going to happen and what do you need to put in place now to smooth that out. Those activities happen now, basically.
Yeah, great point. Marty, we have another question for you as far as the SBA programs from a company that's under 50 employees. They have laid off 3 in mid-March. Would they still qualify for the assistance available through CARES program?
So 50 employees wouldn't be relevant. The relevancy there is 500. So the CARES Act, companies that are under 500 employees are automatically eligible as long as they meet other criteria and they're not doing something that's federally illegal. Yeah, they're going to be eligible. So people who have laid off employees, I mean, certainly you can use the CARES money for your existing employees, but you also have the opportunity to hire back the employees that were laid off.
No.
So some employees may decide that they're better off on unemployment for the first while. That's really their choice. But you have the ability to hire them back, and you can get loan forgiveness based on employees you've hired back. So you would be eligible. What do the employees do at work? I don't think it matters. I believe that the congressional intent behind this program was to get people, to keep their jobs, so that they weren't on the streets. And so for at least an 8-week period, because that's how long this lasts, you can have them on payroll doing nothing, and the money you pay them will be forgivable. After 8 weeks is over, and you'll have to make another decision.
Oh,
and you never know, Congress might extend the whole thing.
Oh, it's interesting. I can see how that can be a real tool for some businesses. So we're coming up on the hour. I do want to thank everybody for, first of all, thank our panelists, Carrie, Mike, Gary, and Marty, for taking the time to talk with us today. Thank you very much. I know your lives are very hectic these days, so we do appreciate you taking the time. I want to thank the people that have dialed in, or as the case might be, clicked on, logged in. We are, as you can tell, this is a work in progress for SEDCOCR, so we're trying to make the technology available to have these kinds of resources brought to a larger audience as we recognize the need out there. So we'll keep working on the technology on our side and get back out with more information in the future. Just want to thank everybody for their time today, and we will be sharing the information along with the link to the webinar. If people do have any questions on an ongoing basis, please, all the SEDCOCR team is working from our homes, but we're available and responsive and looking forward to trying to help however we can. So want to thank everybody for today, and be safe out there. Take care of yourselves, and hope to see you in person very soon. Take care.
Bye-bye.